Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and
vampires.
Other, everyone else. I was trying to think of something witty to say, and nothing came to mind.
Hey, the girls, gays, and theys.
I was like, what's he saying in fucking Cabaret, where he's like something in Boulevardians?
Ooh, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm about to phonetically say the hell out of those German words, and I'm gonna not stop. I'm not gonna embarrass myself. I'm gonna stop while I'm ahead on that one.
Yeah, that's fair.
He says welcome in.
Welcome back. There we go.
That's it. Yeah, that's all he says.
Welcome back to Movies After Midnight. I am your host, Evelyn. I am joined once again by Aaron.
Hi, it's me, Aaron, MFA. I'm just kidding.
Oh, shit. Yeah, MFA
Which
holder.
we talked about last time. I just want to remind everybody.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you should flex.
Thank you so much. It really means nothing, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, it's
now you're discounting everyone else by discounting your own word.
That's true. I shouldn't be so.
But yeah, we are back. We with more Dracula. At least kind of.
Woohoo!
This one is this movie is really a lie, is what it is. Brides of Dracula contains no Dracula, and it's debatable whether it contains any brides, really.
Yeah, hear me out. It felt like a Scooby-Doo episode.
It kind of a little bit. The next one, I actually compared it to a Scooby-Doo episode.
The next one felt extreme. The next one was literally a slasher film, which we'll get to that when we get to the.
Oh yeah.
But I agree with you, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, we're definitely getting into that. I mean, I guess it's contemporary. Like.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Scooby-Doo was the 60s.
60, yeah.
Do.
Because that's actually, the timeline here is interesting. So we have the first Taste the Blood of Dracula in 1958. This one is 1960, so like 2 years later. Christopher Lee at the time was not interested in coming back. He didn't really like the stories that they had for Dracula.
He didn't want to be sexualized anymore. He said, "You guys are too horny for me."
He's like, y'all need Jesus.
No, literally.
But yeah, getting into this one. I wrote it has a camp as hell intro.
It really also, does. I thought it was kind
also
of funny.
I like the parallels between this and Universal, because whenever you have a Dracula series where, like, your main Dracula actor, be it Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee, doesn't want to return, you start going, what other vampire books can I pull from? And inevitably you pull from Carmilla, and as a result, your movie just ends up gay as hell.
Oh my god, we literally watched Dracula's Daughter, and I was watching this one, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But you're so right. Because I was like, also, I couldn't quite figure out, and this might be a me issue, you know what I mean? Yeah. I might have been under the influence of a certain substance while watching. But I don't think it was a good decision, the male actor in it. I'm not trying to drag him or anything, but you set it up with Christopher Lee, and then that's the follow-up? Like,
yeah, I don't think he does a bad job, but yeah, he's definitely a very different, like...
He kind of reminded me of Tom Cruise in Interview with a Vampire. That's kind of what he was giving. Or was that what Tom Cruise was giving, I guess, technically?
Shit. I was actually talking with someone a while back how, like, Interview with a Vampire is the only movie that they can see Tom Cruise in and not just process him as, like, Tom Cruise playing himself.
Was that person me? Because that's the only time I can watch Tom Cruise because he freaks me out. Or did Nick tell you that? That might have been Nick.
It might have been both of you, honestly.
We both like he's so good at Interview with the Vampire, but he just
Yeah.
looks like he looks like he's made out of plastic and everything else.
Yeah. But yeah, speaking of gay as hell vampire movies, and speaking of gay as hell, so we're pretty much immediately introduced to the female lead of this movie, played by Yvonne Monlar, and I don't know, I'm probably fucking up the last name, but she's really hot, and I'm reminded I am gay as hell. Because that was where I was. It was like the yin and yang, where you were like watching Christopher Lee all last movie, and then she was in this movie. And I was like,
You know what? It's like also you had this theory. Evelyn has this theory that if becoming a vampire just makes you gay.
that yeah, we'll get into that later. But I mean, I also had someone else tell me like vampires count as lesbians. So if I have a crush on like a male vampire, it doesn't count. And I'm like, you know what? That makes sense. I can't explain it to you, but it makes sense.
I'm so dead.
But yeah,
Yeah,
so
funny.
oh yeah, this is gonna be a good time. So I noticed right away it felt like this movie was, at least at the start, was like a lot more like up tempo, like getting into things.
Yeah, the film feels like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers at the top. I was like, it was like, it's kind of like, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the first one, where it's a very interesting take on horror, because I don't feel like they're ever scary. And I don't know if it's like the way they're shot with the Technicolor. I don't know if that's what's like throwing me off, but it feels more like I feel like it's like the fine line difference between like a gothic. It's like they're very gothic, but I don't find anything scary. But I don't know if the point is to be scared or if it's like a more existential kind of horror. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely think it's more like existential horror, like the threat to decent society kind of thing.
Which I'm so glad you brought that up too, because I thought that was an interesting like reflection on scale. Because all these films and like all the Dracula lore, I suppose, it feels very like attached to this one place in a very immediate like situation. But at the beginning of this one, they're like, we need to save the world and stop Dracula. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's yeah. Yeah, what happened? So because I noticed we really like carriages rushing through stuff in these movies, because that's, so we start with our lead character Danielle, is like
Holding
she's
on
just
for
being like
dear
knocked
life.
around. It's there's a lot of like unintentionally hilarious like blocking in these movies. But yeah, she's like dropped off at this like tavern, like as a pit stop. Basically, she's on her way to like be a teacher at this school. And we see someone stows away. Wait a minute, now that I'm thinking about it, was that, who the fuck was that guy?
Yeah, he kind of. You know.
He totally dipped out of the plot. Who was this guy? Wait a minute.
I was gonna ask what you thought about him, because I thought it was a thing where like I was like, did I like look away for like a minute and I missed him? But fully, yeah, he kind of just disappears.
I think he's just a random guy. Holy shit.
He just needed to ride into town. And he kind of looks like Christopher Lee a little bit too.
A little bit, yeah.
I also love how in the tavern she's like, "Can you please let me stay?" And they're like, "No, get out."
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're like, yeah, because they hear where she's headed, and they're like, she's gonna go by this castle we're pretty sure has vampires or something in it, but we can't tell her that. And she's like, well, can I stay here? And they're like, no, you should just get on your carriage and keep going. And then like, yeah, the guy like takes the carriage, and And because that's when we get I wrote, as this scene happened, I wrote iconic old lady.
Yeah, she is a really great
Also,
actress.
no, you know, before that, I wrote, they're like, oh, we can serve you some fresh goulash and sauerkraut, and I just wrote ew.
What's wrong with goulash and sauerkraut?
Actually, goulash is actually all right, but I would not pair it with sauerkraut. That sounds
Goulash and
disgusting.
sauerkraut together sound like two ingredients on MasterChef that you get. Like, you get goulash, sauerkraut, like takeout condiments, and then like a steak, and then you have to make something.
It's like a jar of peanut butter.
A jar.
Yeah.
A jar of GIF peanut butter.
God damn it, we're not getting into that.
One thing I did really love though about this film, I really love the color palette they go with.
Yeah, I think we're still using. Are we still using Technicolor on this one?
Yeah, I believe this one is still Technicolor.
It looked. If it's not actual Technicolor, it still definitely has that look.
I think this one was, and then the next one wasn't Technicolor at all.
And
that they keep everything to like purple, red, and blue. But I noticed that like purple kind of touched that female character that you're talking about, the like older woman, and red was like her son, very her son coded, and blue is like kind of like this like shade between the two. I thought it was a very interesting thing.
I didn't think about that, but you're totally right.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I think it helped the storytelling. It was really good.
Yeah. And I think the Baroness here that we're introduced to is really interesting as well, because she, like, we get to know her later on, but she's like spooky at first, but also like sympathetic in a way that a character like this like isn't always. Like there was like depth to her that made her interesting, I felt like.
Well, yeah, I completely agree with you, because they set up this really interesting thing and they carry it over to the next movie, and it'll be interesting to see if they keep carrying it over. But there is this dynamic they set up with older and younger women, where the older woman is like always warning the younger woman, and the younger woman just isn't listening and views her as like being too much or X, Y, and Z, which like it almost feels like a statement that's like pro traditionalism, but I also don't know if it's like a feminist statement instead of that, where it's like women aren't heated. It's a little bit like the new Suspiria. If you've seen the new Suspiria.
I have not.
Oh, okay. If out there you've seen it,
who doesn't watch,
it's kind of like the whole
movies.
point of it. No, it's totally fine. Which I guess technically the new Suspiria is like this, but anyway, to digress, it's like all about not listening to women and the consequences of that. And I think it's really interesting that they set that up and explore that with an older woman and a younger woman usually.
Yeah, well, we're
just getting ahead a little bit
later, but yeah, I think it ties into some other themes. I'll try to remember when we come back to that. But yeah, so the Baroness is like, oh well, if you're stuck here, you should come up to my castle. And the tavern people are like, oh, we actually do have a room.
And then she's like, this is an ugly crib, and this is disgusting, and it makes me sick to be here, and it has a white refrigerator, and you can't stay here.
Literally. Which I think that's another interesting thing, because that also follows in the next movie, where it's like what draws them into like the evil place is like a desire for luxury versus like, you know, the less luxurious wherever else.
Yeah.
But yeah, she goes to the castle, and like immediately like there's very bad vibes from everything, but she can't put her finger on it. And this I thought was interesting, because the whole sequence of her like getting to the castle actually felt a lot more like the original Dracula novel than the start of the last movie that was based on the original Dracula novel.
Yeah.
Where there's like,
that's a good point.
Where Dracula kind of like treats him at first, and then he's like, something's weird, and Dracula's like, no, it's fine. And then like he sees the lady running around, and stuff, and it's almost like a gender flip version of like the intro to Dracula, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and it really carries sorry. It really carries that through too. I think in how her saving him is kind of the reverse of in the first one, him saving her in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a really interesting gender flip for sure. And I thought it was interesting that there was just a female protagonist too. I think it's important to note here.
Yeah.
That was a very
interesting
interesting thing.
Yeah.
Especially for like this time frame, because a lot of film scholars talk about like the 60s as like you lose a lot of female protagonists because of like the rise. Anna Biller discusses it as because of the rise of pornography, there was a drop off in female protagonists because there just like wasn't a need for women in film. Aside from
damn.
Right, and also like a lot of like male genres, like there was one female character that was usually like a love interest and was used very sparingly, and so to have a female lead is super interesting, I think, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think that's in a way that's almost, I think there's because these, I don't know if I would call the Dracula films like exploitation type movies, but they definitely toe the line where they're like marketed on being like, you know, the movies with violence and like boobs and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I keep vacillating between, because they haven't really felt like exploitation films yet. But like, if I'm thinking in the context of the time, there are certain parts, I guess, that have kind of felt.
It's like what you go to if your mom won't let you go to an exploitation film, but you can maybe talk her into letting you go to a Dracula movie.
It's like the 60s equivalent of watching Showgirls.
Yeah, exactly. Showgirls is a Dracula movie. In this paper, I will.
Welcome to my TED Talk. That's gonna be my PhD thesis.
That would be. I'd be here for it. But yeah.
So there.
Because she does kind of drop. Yeah, she does kind of drop off a little, but she's still like important for the whole movie, even when it's not following her. But yeah, and again, like the interaction between the female characters here, where I guess now I think about it, this movie, I guess would fail the Bechdel test because they start talking about her son. But yeah, she's like, I can't remember the exact phrasing where she's like, I saw a man, you said you lived alone, and she's like, you thought what I wanted you to think. I told you there was no one, and now there is, and now you know there is, so it's not a big deal. And she's like, I mean...
Which, like... It was that conversation that you bring up where I was like, man, Christopher Lee was right. This writing is wild. It's like the weirdest, like, are you trying to outsmart her, or like, are you trying to like confuse?
Yeah, well, I think,
what are you doing? What do you mean?
A lot of legit, I not even joking, a lot of gaslighting happens in these movies, and I think that's like a thematic thing. For sure. Where it's like someone's like, clearly something's not right here, and everyone's like, everything is fine, shut up, it's all normal.
What's gaslighting?
Gaslighting's not real.
That's not real. Which is super funny because I think you literally
I make that joke every time someone
first
says
episode
gaslighting.
Of the Dracula.
Some would argue it's not funny anymore, but I think it's hilarious. I mean, nobody has ever said it's not funny. That it's a funny joke that gets laughs every time.
If I agree that it's hilarious, is that still gaslighting if I don't believe it?
See, the fact that you're asking these questions means the gaslighting has already started working, because you don't know where you stand anymore.
My evil plan. Yeah, and also like this weird like backstory with her son is like, it's very interesting how I think there's like a little bit of that kind of commentary where people have a hard time discussing what the actual problem is. And in like polite society, instead they have to make up all these like lies about what's actually going on. And the lies are just so glaringly obvious that it's like, with the polite culture, you're kind of just supposed to accept the lie. And so when she launches into this huge like explanation about what's wrong with her son, it's completely, you're like, this is a liar.
Yeah, well, and also with the polite society too, I think it plays into like society is what keeps these characters there, because like a normal person would be like, this place scares me, I don't like what's going on here, I'm leaving. But because of the like societal rules, they're like, well, they've extended me courtesy, so I have to be polite about it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that definitely causes, like, it's seen as not that serious, but it's something that I think causes real world harm. But especially in a horror movie, they're able to kind of take that to
Yeah.
excess.
And also, I that does kind of extend into, so she keeps Danielle keeps seeing this guy like on the balcony, and later that night she like sees him, like what it looks to her like he's about to jump off a ledge, and she goes to him and she's like, oh, don't jump and stuff, and he's like, oh, you've got to help me, and she's like, sure, I'll help you. And like that almost also feels like, I mean, they imply later that he's got some kind of like maybe vampire hypnosis that like gets her to do what he wants, but also it's her like taking everything he says on face value and like being very trusting and like not altruistic, but like she'd rather like believe that she can help this guy than believe that there's like stuff wrong, and that also kind of like sets things up.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that brings me to like
Also,
two points I want to make on the lessons of this movie. This movie series.
Yeah,
Don't help anyone ever,
exactly.
and no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah. Well, that actually, my lesson I took from this movie was because he's like, oh, my mother hates me and she locks me up and all this stuff, and you gotta help me. And I'm like, she's manipulated by a toxic man with a sob story. Damn. That's the real message of this movie.
Exactly. A really
But so she like, there's this whole sequence where she like goes back up and steals the key, and this movie does do like the last one, there's a lot of really good like setting up different rooms as like recurring locations, and like it feels very video gamey, but also it gives the whole place a sense of like space existing that I really like.
Yeah, it's for sure like the soundstage effect. It didn't bother me at all, except for this one, like a hard stop Peter Cushing has while he's about to exit like a stage thing, and you can tell he just stops because there's nowhere else to go, and that was kind of wild. But like that doesn't matter that much. That's like not that serious. But there was a point I was gonna make about that shoot. Then I got off on my stupid filmmaking thing.
How dare you talk about filmmaking on this film podcast?
I'm sick with myself. Yeah, I lost it.
Yeah, because we also have, there's also like the two women of the house are like this, the Baroness and this like maid who lives there and like takes care of the son, kind of. And I thought I liked both of them in terms of like the performances. Because like once,
yeah, they were really great.
She like, well, especially like once Danielle lets him out, like I very much bought that they were like both like horrified at what was going on, and like especially with the Baroness when he like they like see each other and he like confronts her. And he's like, I can't remember. It was a little silly where he's like, come down here, mother. Or something like that. But like that was a little silly, but the way she played it was really good, where you get that conflicting, like this compassion for her son mixed with knowing that her son is horrible and being terrified of him at the same time. Mm-hmm. I thought she did a good job on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I remember my other point too. It's kind of it's very reminiscent in a way of that Hitchcock film Notorious, with it's Claude Rains, Ingrid Bergman, and Cary Grant, and it's like in it Claude Rains has this mom, and I think the mother-son relationship is something that's really interesting when exploring it. But the very interesting thing that this movie does is it gives you a nice touch of dramatic irony, so you kind of understand everything that's going on. And because you
Yeah.
understand everything that's going on, like those moments where she's going to get the key, like it feels really tense.
Yeah.
And you're nervous. You're like, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Yeah, because it's
Very
like, it's
well
like
done.
either way something bad happens, so you're like.
Yeah, yeah.
But also, I was gonna say I don't have her name down here, but the maid also did a great job, because like there's that part where like she sees that he's like gone, and she's basically like cracked
Oh, like
mentally,
she's like screaming. That was wild.
and she's like screaming, alternating like screaming and laughing, and like that kind of performance can like look stupid so easily. Like there's a very fine line, and I feel like she hit it like perfectly, where I took her seriously, someone who had just like hit this mental threshold and broken a little bit.
Yeah, I completely
But
agree with you.
also, we'll get into this more.
I-
The maid kind of took. I felt like she kind of became what like Renfield was in the original story. Not, I don't think he was in the last movie.
I have a question on that note. Why
Yeah.
do you think it's so easy for Dracula in particular to take it's like all Dracula adaptations have a couple foundational characters, but it feels very loose with everyone else. And I feel like compared to a lot of other series and like book to movie and like all this stuff, I feel like Dracula's unique in that way. Why do you think that is? Or do you think it's unique in that way? What are your thoughts?
Okay, do you want the academic theory or the hater theory?
Well, Evelyn, you're talking to a college-educated MFA student, so I would. No, I'm just kidding. I'm so fucking annoying. Yes, I would like the academic answer. Give me the whole theory. Give me the game theory. Give me the theorizing. The game theorizing.
Because I think it's. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the fact that Dracula himself, like, hits. I don't know, hits a certain note that like. I think it's just a sign of a good character, like Sherlock Holmes or something, where like certain characters like hit a note with people that like allows them to exist in any context, and like
Well,
that's
but then you
that's
have
the
like,
story.
but I get that with Dracula, but like when it comes to like Renfield, for example, right? Like
Okay,
it feels like it's very easy to switch out Renfield for whoever, but they serve Renfield's purpose. Like, why do you think it's so Dracula's so focused on like just Dracula? What, like, I'm just super curious to what you think.
Yeah, I'm not as sure, but I think it's.
Do you think it's because he's such a strong character that it's like the only one to focus? You know, what do you think?
I think it's actually. I think in that case, it's almost. I think it's an issue of like the mythologizing of a character, because especially by this point in 1960, like and like even especially today, like when people think of Dracula, they think of the Bela Lugosi movie that has nothing to do with the novel. And then of the people that think of that, only a small percentage of them have actually seen the movie. So there's like, I think when audiences see Dracula, there's only so many details they need, because the actual like the story itself isn't what's embedded in the public consciousness, if that makes sense.
Wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually.
My hater theory that I came up with, well, so a lot of people really like Bram Stoker's original Dracula novel. I think it's very important. I think it's a good, like, I think it holds a lot of significance. But as I was watching this and I was thinking back on the last movie, and I'm like, maybe Bram Stoker's Dracula is just not that like good of a story, and the farther you get narratively from it, the better Dracula story you have.
Well, I think it's limited by the style it's written in.
Yeah.
You can only get like so much from like the letters, I think.
Yeah, saying it's not a good story is a little harsh, because I think it works for the novel that it is, and when you make, I haven't seen a direct.
Dracula stands are gonna come cancel it.
I haven't seen a direct adaptation of the novel that I've really liked. And maybe that's me.
I would love your thoughts on that one Last Voyage of the Demeter.
I
You
do
ever see
need to
that
see
one?
that. That
I
sounds
thought that one
pretty
was
boss.
pretty good.
Yeah. Where were we in this movie?
Van Helsing was about to show up.
Okay, yeah. So she like runs from the castle as the maid's like screaming.
She
and
lets him out.
whatnot.
Oh, she lets him out. We kind of like jumped around.
Yeah.
She steals the key. She lets him out, and then I think we stopped explaining it there. Actually,
Yeah, she lets him out, and he's like, there's a lot of back and forth because he's like,
mother,
get your coat and come with me and we'll leave the castle. And she's like, okay. And she follows, like, she's gonna leave, and then the mother shows up and she's like, oh my god, you let him out. And he's like, come here, mother. And like, and then he's like, I know I just said I was gonna go with you, but go up to your room while I deal with this. And she's like,
I thought that
okay.
was so funny. She runs down to get him from where he is, and then he's like, go back up there. And it happens in like two. That was pretty funny blocking.
And well, especially because she walks past his mother
mom
on the
again,
staircase,
yeah.
which is just like all kinds of goofy.
It's like
Well, it reminds me- remember the last movie? How like at the start, like Dracula wakes up, leaves his coffin, leaves the room. Jonathan goes in, sees that he's gone. Then Dracula walks back into the room that he just left, so that he can surprise him at the top of the staircase.
Yeah.
I feel like this is an issue of like we built the sound stage, so we just have to like work our dramatic moments around the stage that already exists.
I completely agree with you, and I think it's really funny that we keep noticing it in this movie compared to like all the other movies from this era that we've seen. I just think it's really funny that it's kind of becoming like something in all of them.
Yeah.
But so she
Yeah, and that's
goes back
when
upstairs,
she,
and then there's a standoff.
Yeah, she like. That's why, and then she hears like screaming and stuff, and she goes to the maid, and the maid's like, "Oh, you let him out, didn't you?" And she's like, "I don't know," and the maid
I have a question.
Yeah.
He turns his mom into a vampire, right?
Yes.
Is that Is it meant to be implied incestuous?
I don't know, but maybe.
Because I wanted to ask what you thought about it, because it felt a little bit like it to me, because it's been so sex-coded.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but there's definitely a hint of that in there.
Yeah, it was kind of wacky. I was like, oh.
Well, especially with like kind of the Norman Bates angle of like a guy who's been sort of in a way infantilized and like held captive by his own mother, kind of.
Yeah, that's true. Wow.
But yeah, the maid shows her the dead baroness, or quote air quotes dead baroness, and she's like got his grave, and she's like, but he'll always come back or whatever, and like, yeah, Danielle's like, this is fucked up, I'm getting out of here, and presumably passes out in the woods, where she is found the next morning by Peter Cushing, fresh out of the last movie.
One, he's striking me more as Sherlock Holmes in this movie than he is Van Helsing, personally.
Oh, I think he played. Has he ever played Sherlock Holmes? I would be shocked if he hadn't.
I think he like has to, like, right? I feel like that's just like a rite of passage if you're like a British actor.
He's played Doctor Who.
Oh.
I think I mentioned that in the last episode.
And I just feel like, this is the part that was tough with me about this movie. Because I feel like once Peter Cushing shows up and Van Helsing is there, the whole thing kind of just then feels like a daytime soap opera to me.
I could see that. It definitely, the way I processed it was kind of, I was like, it kind of feels like what I said about when we were talking about the Howling 4 way back when, where I'm like, it kind of feels like an adventure game where you're like going around interviewing people and like picking up evidence or whatever. Because
like it kind of, for me, it just, the movie stopped dead for a minute and had to like re-ramp up, because it's almost like, and I didn't mind the dramatic irony earlier with like the mom and the kind of like thriller sequences, but this is a moment where I felt like it didn't work, because all of a sudden we get like the whole first part of the movie re-explained while he's figuring it out. And so it just felt a little redundant for a second. I did love though when he's talking to that guy.
Also, he has played Sherlock Holmes.
That is, yeah, checks out. That checks out.
For the first time in 1959 in Hound of the Baskervilles and several occasions more.
But he's talking to this guy who kind of becomes like somebody helping him at the tavern.
Okay,
He explains who he is. The actor goes, "Thank God you've come. Thank God." And I thought the line delivery on it was so funny.
I think that character was like a priest, so it's like, thank God, because I'm a priest, so I have to talk about God.
Yeah. Which, okay, we're gonna get on that with the next movie, but
okay, yeah,
religion is very interesting in these movies.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess that's. I'm actually thinking about it. I think that's why. So we were talking about So we watched 2 movies before recording podcast, and Aaron was like, "Yeah, I really liked the second one we watched after this," and I was like, "Oh, really?" In a very like
Evelyn, so
I have no poker face. We've established this.
You were like, "Oh, you do? Interesting. I'm gonna need you to explain that to me later."
But I was like, I think I liked this one a little more, and I think I realized the difference is like the enjoyment you get out of this movie is directly proportional to how much you enjoy watching Peter Cushing run around like investigating stuff.
And like, for me, that's not what I'm here for Dracula. I'm here for vampires.
That's fair. That makes a lot of sense. Like I just realized like where we diverge, and that, yeah,
2 trees diverge.
That is very
in the
fair.
Woods.
Because also I was gonna write, I do like on the subject of Peter Cushing, because the other thing he was doing with Hammer, he actually doesn't show up in that many more Dracula movies because he was doing the Hammer Frankenstein series. And I think like watching the 2 together really shows his range, because he's a very like a fairly heroic character in these movies, and then in Frankenstein he's just like literally the worst person ever, and I think he plays both really convincingly.
Yeah, in these movies the man's a cinnamon roll.
Yeah,
he's getting beat up by everybody, and he just you feel bad for him almost.
Yeah.
He's an intellectual, he's not a fighter. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's really, yeah,
There's
that's really
nothing wrong with that.
Because they bring it back to this is a little it's funny in retrospect, but they made it flow all right, because he takes her back to town because he was headed back to town anyway, and then he hears about this other girl who is like dead, and like talks to people about that, and then he's like, oh, well, I got to take you to the school you're headed to, so I'll take you there. And then he takes her there, and it's very like back and forth. But I thought they made it work. But in retrospect, it is very like, that's what I guess compared to the first movie, I felt like there was a little more transitional fiber for me to latch onto. Because I think we talked about.
I agree with that. The first movie, it's very like, bam, 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 bam. This is the next scene. This is the next scene. And then this. And then this. And it keeps cutting out of scenes in a really weird way. Like I think I said it in the Dracula episode, but they cut out of scenes like right before the most interesting thing happens.
Yeah.
And like on the whole with this one, yeah, like you said, I completely agree. There's much more like we're going along. It's a lot more ease of storytelling. It's a lot easier to follow. It's easier to follow. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. I wrote they get the Midwestern welcome at the school, because everyone, it's just kind of like record scratch, and everyone's like staring at them.
Everyone's like, ew.
And then everyone's weird, and then the headmaster's like, you should have showed up way before. What are you doing, young lady? And then Van Helsing's like, no, she's with me. It's cool. And he shows him his credentials, and he's like, oh shit, never mind. And I can't remember. He reads his card, and it's like kind of silly, because he's like, oh, I should have expected no less from and then he looks at the card and he's like, Doctor of Medicine, Psychology, Mythology, and rattles off like 7 different things that Van Helsing is like a doctor of.
Van Helsing is really giving like self-publisher on Amazon, you know?
Maybe.
Yeah,
And
I also like this trend that like Van Helsing, like people just aren't taking him seriously until he like whips out his resume.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's actually, now we're getting a little closer to it. Because a little bit later, we're introduced to like a doctor, like a medical doctor who's like kind of a doofus. And then like the scene immediately after this is when he's talking to like the priest who invited him here to like look into vampire stuff. And I think it's interesting how we have examples of a priest who represents like pure like old ways, faith, mythology, and like he understands some things but he can't really do anything about it. And then this doctor who represents like, academics and learning, who's just totally ignorant and a doofus. And then Van Helsing is like the one in the middle who's like an educated guy but also who believes in like the spiritual, and he's like the only one who can actually do anything. And I think that's like a theme in all of these, is like that middle ground between like what did I wrote it down somewhere, between like
no sorry, what were you gonna say?
I think like between faith and academics, or like you have to have both the old ways and the new ways, because only one or the other doesn't work, kind of thing. And I think we were talking about like the older woman trying to pass stuff on to the younger woman, and I think that kind of ties into that. It's that same idea.
Yeah, I think at first I was viewing it as a pro-traditional movie, which was very strange to me. But I actually, no, I see what you mean, and I think I agree. I definitely agree with you. And I don't think I was taking it as far as it's that middle way. It's like the Metropolis, the like
No, it's like
the
I thought
heart
we were gonna
is in the middle, and the head and the hands. But what were you gonna say?
I thought we were going like Buddha, like if you tighten the loop too tight, it will snap. If you leave it too snack, it will not play.
Yes.
Also, vampirism is a pagan cult. I wrote that down.
A pagan cult that's threatening the entire world.
Yeah, well, because he's like, he asks what vampires are, and he's like, it's a cult rooted in the pagans' beliefs when they were first rebelling against Christianity, and I'm like, that is an interesting way to take that.
They add a couple little
But
interesting vampire lore notes to this one where you're like, I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever heard of that with vampires, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, there's not very many followers for the cult.
Yeah, well, yeah. Because
They make it sound like a world-ending problem they're solving.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, I think they kind of give the idea that it's like, it was a big problem and now it's still a problem, but it's a very like, there's like
Niche
little
problem.
tiny groups of vampires all over the place kind of thing.
Got it. Like the howling and werewolves.
Exactly. Actually, exactly. Also, the more of these we watch, the more I understand all the things they were homaging in The Howling 2.
Yeah. They had some kick-ass title cards at the beginning of this movie too. We didn't talk about that, but
Oh yeah, they were some really good. They were like Scooby-Doo title cards.
yeah.
Also, so yeah, I already talked about the maid being Renfield, but yeah, Van Helsing goes. He finally gets up to the castle and starts like looking around. And I wrote, Van Helsing finds the coffin gone, and Van Helsing is bad at his job, because he like he starts talking to the Baroness, and then the Baron shows up, and he like, I think he kind of scares him away with a cross, and then the Baron just kicks his ass and leaves.
Is this when he bites him too?
That's later.
Shit. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But
Yeah,
yeah, he keeps getting his ass. Oh no, this is where I wrote Van Helsing is an intellectual, not a fighter. This is
Yeah.
where I wrote that.
Yeah, he is not.
He is.
Yeah, he's not good at physical dust ups.
I also love this like dynamic where like it's like a giant castle, and like people are constantly like fighting and then having a break, and then fighting and then having a break from each other. It's very interesting.
It's like the video game boss where like you get their health bar down to a certain spot and then a cutscene kicks in and you have to like do the rest of the level and then get to the other boss fight.
Yes, that's exactly what it feels like. It's like in Sly Cooper, the Thievius Raccoons.
Exactly.
That's exactly what those games are like.
But also so we see the Baroness talks to Van Helsing a little bit after this as a vampire. And I thought this was interesting because I think it's the only example we get of someone who's been made a vampire, but who's like, this is bad. I don't want to be a vampire. Instead of just being like, woohoo, I'm hot and evil now. Let's go. And
what do you think that like retroactively says about the hot and evil characters? Do you think it's making a statement on like people are inherently evil?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could be like looking at it in the context of her, it could be like, you know, the wisdom of like an older person versus like youth is more easily tempted down the wrong path.
The superficiality.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Maybe. Yeah, like that would make sense with the vibes I'm getting from this. But yeah, she's like, there's no death for me now, and he's like, there is one way. And then it cuts away, and like we have some other stuff, but I want to address this now because I keep thinking about it. So I'm like, okay, he stakes her off screen. That makes sense, you know. He's giving her it's like the movie respects this character, so they're giving her like an honorable off-screen death in a kind of way. That makes sense. But no, it cuts back later in the morning, so it's like he slept over, like stayed the night, and then wakes up and stakes her. And I'm like, did Van Helsing like fuck the vampire baroness? Because that's a really weird thing for him to have done.
He's staked
but
her,
it kind of seems like he
you know
did.
What I mean,
like, why else would he have done that if they weren't like, if they didn't like take a little, you know, at the very least they cuddled, and that's a very weird thing for him to do as a vampire hunter, I feel like. And I just wanted to discuss that. I don't really have any place to take it, but the way it's cut and framed, it's giving they slept together, and I don't know what to do with that.
I think that maybe it's making commentary on how men are inherently unable to do their jobs without being horny.
Sure, what that makes as much sense as anything, honestly.
Representation matters, and that's how they are. I don't know how to think.
That's why he's able to do it later, because now now he's got post nut clarity and he's able to focus on the problem instead of thinking about how horny he is.
My God. I'm so dead. You're so right.
But yeah, so during that interlude, though, we go back to Danielle at the school, and the Baron he shows up and
but I need to say one last thing. You're also right, because he's literally disheveled too. It's not like he just like wakes up. He like wakes up in like a daze, and his hair's all messed up. It's like a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, we can move on now.
Yeah. I wrote the Baron shows up, and I wrote he engages Danielle because he doesn't really propose to her, but he's like, hey, like. He's like, hey, how's it going? And then it cuts later, and she's like, we're engaged now. And I'm like, I feel like he didn't ask her. I feel like he just told her, like, hey, we're getting married.
I agree with you. I completely think that too. But this is another point where I was like, is this character supposed to feel incestuous? Because like they kind of look the same, and I know they're not siblings or anything, but I couldn't tell if the implication was to be like, you know, was to reinforce. You know what I mean? I couldn't tell.
Or does the director just think like strawberry ginger people are like cute, and that's like his bleeding into his filmmaking? If you're a strawberry ginger,
you're a vampire.
I mean, I did notice, like, in at least the last few movies, if you're a redhead, your chance of becoming a vampire is way higher than anyone else, and I don't know
That's because
what
red
that
is
says.
the color of blood. The color
Like,
of
and I want
blood.
to say that's like a Hammer trope. I don't know what, but like,
Because the red hair.
yeah. And gingers don't have souls, so they make
And they
easier
don't have souls. So
vampires.
exactly.
And also we get like a very short character arc of like this one girl at the school is like, wow, he's so hot. I'm so happy you're engaged to him. I wish I was engaged to a hot guy like that. I'm jealous of you. And then she's like, and then she like burns her toast in the fireplace. And Danielle's like, oh, I'll get you some more toast. And then he shows up and he like vampires the young girl. And like it's very quick like character establishment because we've never seen this character before, and then the next time we see her, she's a vampire.
Also, let me tell you, this
like,
guy's no Christopher Lee.
Yeah, no, not quite. He reminds me of someone, and I couldn't tell you who.
He's like a very like character tropey kind of character for sure. He kind of reminded me of Alfred Ashford from Resident Evil Code Veronica in a weird way.
Damn.
It's just the kind of like bratty entitled royal.
Yeah, I was gonna say the character it's not, because I think this actor might have been in some Hammer movies, but in Star Trek there's an episode called The Squire of Gothos where there's this like old-timey, like he's like an all-powerful space god basically, but he takes the form of like an entitled like British colonial guy and keeps like trying to get them to like, you know, engage in like war and hate, and Kirk's like, we're better than that and stuff.
Kirk's like, we're better than that.
But like he kind of reminds me of that guy. Trelane, if you're a Star Trek person.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I am not familiar with that.
Yeah, but
I'm gonna take your word for it.
Yeah, that's just for our viewers that may or may not.
Yeah, I trust you.
Yeah. I was like giving a skim I was like skimming Wikipedia to double check my details real quick. But yeah, so he's like doing stuff in the school, and yeah, that's when we get Van Helsing after he, you know, the morning after he wakes up, stakes the Baroness, goes back, and this is where we get the doctor, who is like a very goofy character, and like I kind of hated him at first, but like I sort of came around on him by the end of the movie, because he doesn't have a bunch of scenes, but he's just kind of there to be goofy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With him, he was just a little irrelevant to me.
Yeah. Mostly, I like a little later because he's like, Van Helsing shows up and talks to the tavern keeper, and the tavern keeper's like, oh, you should talk to this other doctor who's in town, because he's going up to this school because a girl died, and Van Helsing's like, well, shit, that's the school that I dropped that one chick off at. This can't be good.
Well, I don't think he's irrelevant to the story. He was just irrelevant to me. This is a me issue.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
No, I was, yeah. But yeah, they get to the school, and a little later there's this thing where the doctor's like, oh, do you mind if I have a glass of wine? And then Danielle ignores him and starts talking to Van Helsing. And like it's an important conversation in the foreground, and in the background you just see the doctor like shrug that no one's listening to him and start pouring himself some wine. And it was the funniest like actor improv choice I've ever seen.
It was pretty good. Also, the wine in all these movies looks insane.
Yeah, well,
I cannot tell what they're drinking.
Especially because it's all kinds of funny colors. There's like green and blue and red. And, like,
they're drinking like potions.
Yeah. It's like a mad scientist like brewed these up for them.
Yeah, literally.
But yeah, so Van Helsing, this isn't his first or even second rodeo at this point. So Van Helsing's like, this girl's definitely been bitten by a vampire, but I can't tell them that because they'll think I'm insane. So he's like, she's got like a communicable disease. Lock
He
her up.
gives him,
Have
like-
people watch her overnight.
He gives him like a whole manual
Yeah.
that honestly
'Cause he's-
I think sounds stranger than just saying she's a vampire.
Well, at the very least, he is very trusting of these people to like follow these complicated instructions to the letter instead of just being like, you know what, as a doctor, can I like stay over and like watch her dead body overnight? Because that's in all of these movies, like the fact that he's like, this is like the most important thing in my life is vampire hunting. But I'm gonna tell these people to watch the vampire because I got like other stuff to do.
I have to run some
I guess.
errands. Yeah, he's fully like, oh yeah, and she's super contagious, so don't let anybody in. But make sure you have eyes on her body at all times. And I'm like, what are these people supposed to do?
Yeah. So this results in a scene where they're like, they have her casket in the stable, and Danielle comes to like, she's like, I'll watch over you get some rest, to the lady who is sitting there. And then she sends the other guy out, and he gets killed by a bat, and it's kind of funny.
I was not prepared for that. Because the shot is like 2 seconds long. You could tell they're like trying to hide the puppet. But I wish they would have just committed. Because it's fine. It was kind of surreal. It looked like it didn't look like a bat. It looked like Mothman.
Shit, it's the moth bat.
It was the moth bat. Yeah.
But basically this all sets up so that she can be alone in the stable when the other girl wakes up and like climbs out as a vampire. And this is where I wrote in my notes, vampirism makes you gayer, because she immediately just starts like advancing on her in the most sexual way possible.
It's like 0 to 100. She's like, let's make out right now.
Yeah, well, she's like propositioning her for a poly relationship, because she's like, I should apologize for loving the man you're engaged to, but we can both have him. I'm like,
she's
damn.
Like, let's go fuck him right now. And she's
literally
like, oh, okay.
And then I wrote, vampirism makes you gay and poly, and also Van Helsing is still bad at his job, because he shows up, and I think I think she kind of beats his ass a little and runs off.
She does.
And he doesn't like, instead of like stopping the vampire, he runs to like, it makes sense, I guess, that he wants to check on Danielle, but I'm like, I feel like his priority should be stopping the vampire from getting away. But that's not his priority, I guess.
No, Van Helsing also wants to proposition Danielle.
Maybe. Who knows at this point?
That's what I got. I got that he was in love with her.
And so this is, so this is like things like start rolling very quickly. And he's like, you need to tell me where the Baron is. And she's like, I don't know. And he's like, seriously, you need to tell me. She's like, okay, he's at this, he's living in this old windmill. And I like that she didn't question this. Like, she knows this, but she didn't question it. Yeah?
No, actually, I'm mixing it up with something that happens in the next one. Never mind, continue.
Okay, yeah.
Just kidding.
Oh, okay. According to Wikipedia, she knows this because the other girl said something about it, like, as she was...
Yeah. It was the fact. It was where he was. It was like where he was. I think that she said. She said we can go get him at this place, and then something got brought up with the place. I think that's what it was.
Okay, yeah. But so yeah, Van Helsing goes there, and
he needs to know where he is, and she doesn't want to tell him, and then she tells him because the other lady said. That's what it was.
Yeah, we're back on track. But like, so he goes to the windmill, and like, the two brides are there and like pose enough of a threat to him. And I like the whole Erin messaged me. She was like, I love that this whole time they just kind of stand there and watch, like, yeah, because
they're not really cheerleaders. They're like the most like, whoa, like it's like they're both like stoned watching.
Yeah, literally. But yeah, so the Baron shows up, and Van Helsing, like, they fight and he gets his ass beat again, but also I like he makes a good So he like swing like kicks him over, and then like he like Van Helsing kicks the Baron over like and then like dive tackles on top of him. And I'm like, that is the dumbest, funniest way to attack a vampire I've ever seen in a serious movie.
Yeah, I still, it's like, it happened in the first one, so you'd think I'd be ready, but like something about like fist fighting a vampire is very silly to me.
Well, also because I was thinking the fact he's a vampire, but he's able to, like at the start he was able to be like kept by like a chain around his leg. So we're very like, vampires are a supernatural threat, but they're not like as powerful, I think, as we think of them
the
now.
only change is that you become more horny and you become that's the only change. You get fangs, you become more horny, and you're immortal.
Everything else honestly, damn. I'm halfway there.
Which, like, yeah, exactly. I mean, Evelyn, you're just a Evelyn, you know, you do only hang out at night, now that I'm thinking about it. I've never seen you out during the day. Don't say anything.
Don't expose me on air like this.
I'm so dead. And then this vampire, whoever the hell he is, what is his name?
What is his name?
The Baron. That's what I was thinking.
Baron Meinster. That's his name.
Whoever the fuck this guy is, he did what Christopher Lee couldn't do.
He did. Yeah.
He fucks Van Helsing.
Metaphorically fucks Van Helsing.
Metaphorically.
He bites him and then leaves. And I wrote, Van Helsing gets his ass beat and bit because see above, and I drew an arrow up to the last time I wrote Van Helsing is bad at his job.
I was like, damn, Van Helsing got bit. That's gonna be so interesting. But then they take some liberties with vampire lore.
Yeah, well, I think they take liberties, but it's kind of interesting the way they do it, at least in this one. Mm-hmm. So this is my filmic breakdown. So what he does, he wakes up and he's like, oh shit, I've been bit by a vampire. And he like, they have this like superhero music playing while he does this too. And I thought that was interesting.
They do. That's such a good way to describe it.
But so there's like a forge there in the windmill, and he like takes the metal thing and he like jams it against his neck to like cauterize the wound. But then he pours like holy water over it, and it like magically heals the vampire bite. And I think it makes sense on a sort of metaphoric level, I think, because I was like, honestly, it's kind of metal as hell, but because I think the idea is that like becoming a vampire in these movies is like an act of surrender, you know, where like the vampire is like, just do what I say, and like I'll make things really cool for you, and you're like, okay, and then like you like become a vampire. Whereas this is like the opposite of that, where he's resisting becoming a vampire through an act that requires a lot of like willpower and dedication, where he's like, you know, suffering through this pain in the knowledge that it's like what he has to do to like stay on the right path. And so like metaphorically, as an act of like will versus an act of surrender, I think it kind of works. I don't know that ties into like the central themes of the film, but I think you could, if you wanted to, you could take it that way.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And that's my thesis paper on this movie.
Wow. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I agree.
But also, yeah. But after that, yeah, the Baron shows back up with Danielle, and
she's still in denial about her shitty boyfriend.
Yeah, literally.
Or fiance, I guess. Fiance.
Yeah. But I feel like all of these movies, like, they kept writing them, and then at some point they were like, well, the vampire has to die, and I don't know how to do it, so we're just gonna have to pull something out of our ass. Because he's like, actually, they set up and paid off earlier. The priest gave him some holy water. They have a
scanner's battle at the end.
Yeah, so Van Helsing like flings some holy water at him, and he's like, ow, my face.
And he starts melting.
Yeah. And he like runs off, and he like kicks over the forge to like set the windmill on fire, and the two of them like run to the top, and Van Helsing like jumps down and grabs the like fins of the windmill so that it like he pulls the windmill into the shape of a cross, and the shadow of the cross like kills the Baron. And I'm like, that's right on the line between kind of cool and mostly just really silly to me.
I thought it was completely bananas, and I loved it. It's like, that's kind of like, I kind of wish it was more like that the entire time, because I feel like the entire time, like, all of his investigating, it's treated like pretty serious.
Yeah.
And like, that was the most like fun it felt. I'm like, a shadow of a cross, like, that is the most like cockamamie plan.
Yeah, it felt very like, we have to wrap this up, so here you go. Also, neither of the, like, if we're operating on, some movies establish, you know, if like the head vampire dies, everyone they made a vampire is like freed of their curse. But I don't think we established that, so we have two like vampire girls who are just still kind of around at the end of this movie.
They just settled down in the mountains. And living, they just settled off grid while the vampires fight their world war.
Jesus.
That's deep lore.
And then they come back and become college professors and make a movie. And
exactly.
Actually, I mean, maybe if we're going with the gay themes, maybe they just ran off and lived like as lesbians in the mountains somewhere.
Yeah. Like a Brokeback Mountain, but 2 women.
Exactly. I saw a thing not long ago where it was a post about Brokeback Mountain, and then someone was like, "This is the best gay film ever before things got so woke," and I was like, "That is." I don't even know how to process that.
I'm like, are you listening to yourself? Did you like what? Are you confused? Am I confused? Are you testing me?
Trying to make the gays woke, damn it. but yeah, so that was Brides of Dracula.
Brides of Dracula. I gotta say, I wouldn't want to be a bride to this Dracula.
Yeah, well, he's not even. That's the thing, because he's not Dracula, and there's, what is it? Okay, yeah. The poster
Dracula.
Here says the most evil, bloodlusting Dracula of all, and so I was like,
Dracula,
that only
like
makes
a species.
Yeah, that only makes sense if you're using Dracula as like interchangeable for vampire. And that's even funnier to me. Like, oh man, look at all these Draculas.
On the census, you have to check a box if you're a Dracula.
A Dracula American. It's like calling Pokemon Pikachus.
I don't like the word dog per se, but
that's a deep cut.
I don't like the word Dracula per se, but I'll hold your Dracula American. Slay.
Yeah. I did enjoy this. I enjoyed this one more than I enjoyed the first one.
Really?
Yeah, I thought like the pacing made a little
favorite.
More sense to me.
Got it. That makes sense. You know, I thought this one was
there were
right.
there were more like queer-coded women for me to stare at, and maybe that's a factor.
I want Christopher Lee. Yeah, Christopher Lee or nothing.
So there are two films.
What do we want? Christopher Lee. When do we want it? Now.
Two films in this series that don't have Christopher Lee. One of which has neither Christopher Lee nor martial arts, and we just finished that one. So yeah, we're gonna be going full bore on the Christopher Lee.
Yay! That's all I'm here for. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, actually,
I got to the next one. Can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting because I've heard it debated whether or not this even counts as part of the series.
I think it counts in the same way Halloween 3 counts.
Brides of Dracula is the Howling 3 of the Hammer Dracula series.
No, not Howling 3, Halloween 3.
Oh, that makes
I know you
I mean,
really love the Howling franchise. I know it's your favorite franchise. Just kidding.
I've seen all the Howling movies. I don't know if you know.
Wow, have you seen all the Howling movies? I wish I could get
Yeah.
your thoughts on all of them.
Yeah, if only there was a podcast available on YouTube right now where you could hear our thoughts on all the Howling movies, some of the Frankenstein movies, and then all of the Hammer Dracula movies.
Maybe when we start our Patreon, we'll do a Patreon exclusive where we talk about all the Frankenstein movies we missed.
Actually, I'm so pissed off because I was like, we can do Dracula December because that, the alliteration makes sense. But I was like, we could have kept doing Frankenstein because then it could have been like Gold Frankenstein and Myrrh, and it would have been a funny little Christmas joke.
Aw, that would have been cute. Next year, everybody.
Next year. Let us know in the comments. But yeah, so yeah, this was I enjoyed our time here, and I'm interested to see where the series goes.
Delightful.
Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. And again, we don't have a we
Also, I'm
I
dying
can
at how
hiss
we
like a
always
vampire, but I'm not doing that.
Blah blah blah.
That was it. Blah.
That was it. The blah. Blah blah.
Blah, everyone. Blah.
Blah blah. Drop your blaze in the comments.
Comment blah if you made it to the end of the episode.
Then,
Perfect.
perfect. Excellent.
Right.
We'll see you guys
Bye.
next time.
See you guys.
Thank you for having me, Evelyn.
Thank you for joining me. Hey everyone, Evie here. If you enjoyed today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider giving us the old like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date when we drop new episodes. If you didn't enjoy today's episode of Movies After Midnight, consider following me on one of the many social media platforms out there and leaving criticisms or strongly worded hate speech. Either way, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I'll see you next time.